Hello, everyone. Uh, my name is Faisal Al Mutar, and I'm the founder and president of Ideas Beyond Borders. Um, Thank you for those who are joining us live on our Zoom, and also those who are watching us online. Maybe I can give you, for those of you who are new to Ideas Beyond Borders and the book, The Untold Stories of the Middle East, and the program that it covers, Innovation Hubs, sort of giving you some background about us. So my name is Faisal, as I said. I'm originally from Iraq. I have been involved in the field of counter-extremism, but development and prosperity and the world of freedom for more than 20 years now. And as of 7 years ago, I founded the organization Ideas Beyond Borders with the help of many people at the team to really try to shape a better future for the Middle East. First, by making the ideas that made the world a better place, the ideas of freedom, human rights, and democracy available in the languages spoken in the region. But then later, as we saw more and more people who are from our community, which is now roughly 8.5 million subscribers, and adjacent communities, there are a lot of people who want to take action on these values. And after conversations with a lot of people who supported this organization, or some of them are here with us, and those who are on the advisory role, we came up with this program, which is called the Innovation Hub. And simply for those of you who are familiar with Professor Tyler Cowen at George Mason University, and he also happens to be at the Mercatus Center, he launched a program called the Emergent Ventures. And after looking at this model, which is tends to be more less on overhead, more on power to the people, uh, and in more risk taking, we decided to go with this one as it fits more with what I would call the IBB DNA, which is more about empowering the people and less about building bureaucracies and hurdles. And I will be giving a full talk on that in TED this year in Georgia, where I'll be talking about remodeling international developments and how can we actually create change with less amount of money, but more impact. So for those of you who are donors and for those of you who are interested in development and empowering other people, uh, we don't claim that we have figured out all the solution or the best solution, but I think now is one of the reasons why we decided to publish this book with the help of Olivia is we want to show that our model has a very great track record, and we can show that utilizing a more flexible model, which people can easily apply with very quick judgment, with incremental amount of money, you'll see that a lot of magic happens. A lot of amazing things do happen, and we're going to touch more on them in this conversation. And after that, we will have a Q&A for those of you who are here and watching us online. And I think the conversation will be pretty wonderful. So many of you probably have read Olivia's articles through our newsletter or through our website, ideasbeyondborders.org. But I think this is the first time you interact with some of our audiences. So Olivia, the floor is yours. Tell us more about yourself. How did you become interested in the subject of development and empowerment as a whole?
Hi everyone, it's great to be here. So I'm currently based in London, but for most of my career, I've been out in the Middle East. I started in the Gulf and I moved to Jordan in 2015, just as the country was taking in hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees. Living there enabled me to focus my reporting on the areas that I really wanted to cover. So human rights, international development, particularly actually issues affecting women. My breakthrough story, so to speak, came when I managed to blag my way onto a landfill to speak to refugee children who were working as waste pickers there from the nearby Zatari refugee camp, I think the largest refugee camp in the Middle East. that was picked up by The Guardian. I then was able to pitch stories to other big papers about issues I encountered in Jordan, in particular, so-called honor crimes, online blackmail, domestic violence, but as well as pieces, more positive pieces about things like female representation in the Jordanian parliament and the country's burgeoning startup sector. So obviously there's always a lot for journalists to say about the problems people face and the flaws in the system. But what I also heard when I went and met with people affected by these issues was from and about all the people working in those fields to find solutions and put them into action. And increasingly, I felt drawn to focus my efforts there and highlight how people were trying to fix the issues that they faced. First in Jordan, and then after that, I was in North Lebanon, building up to the protests there in 2019. I then spent some time in Iraq during the Tishreen protests, covering those for the Sunday Times. But I also found some time while I was in Iraq to explore some of the entrepreneurial activity that I encountered there and in Kurdistan especially. Obviously, it was a time of huge upheaval, but there was also a lot of hope and energy at that time, and particularly in the kind of creative and startup communities. So when Faisal approached me a few years later and asked me if I wanted to come on board and write the stories of the Innovation Hub, it felt like a natural fit. And that brings me to today.
And I think, I mean, we digitally met. I mean, now in the world of digital and physical, I think when you were in Iraq, right, when you were covering the University of Mosul that was destroyed by ISIS, and I think we were starting a translation program
It,
there.
it was the wisdom program. Yeah.
Yeah, so that feels a bit long time ago, but it's actually 20, that will be 2019, I think, when we started that project. And so yeah, that and then so as I mean, you frequently visit the region, and you talked about kind of the negative and the positive. I mean, the Zaatari refugee camp is known for, I think people can Google it. It's sometimes referred to as the Harvard of terrorism. It's a place where a lot of, unfortunately, young people get recruited to join gangs, um, and I mean, can you explain more, like when you were visiting there, what struck you more about the people there? Was there anything kind of stood out other than obviously the misery that was happening all around?
Yeah. And it's a grim environment, as you can imagine. There's very little space for hope, but people do find it. And there are pockets of opportunity that people create and commit themselves to in the midst of these dire living conditions, um, working really hard to do what they can to improve their situation and those of others around them. That's often really what strikes me the most, is the extent to which people are willing to help others even when they're really struggling themselves. But that's not just there, that's not just in Zaatari. I mean, I see that all across the region, people in different circumstances, it's not always people who are suffering and struggling. Sometimes it's people who have middle-class people who have education, but they've chosen to focus all of their efforts on helping others. And you see that an awful lot in the Middle East, and increasingly I'm finding in Afghanistan as I speak to more of our grantees there.
Yeah, I also remember a story when we were in the Asyan camp, which is a predominantly Yazidi refugee camp in northern Iraq, Kurdistan region, and one of the refugees was asking us to have lunch with them. And I was like, maybe I should be the one inviting you for lunch because I was just, I guess, a fresh off the boat American at that time. But I was like, maybe I'm the one who should. But even living in their kind of most difficult environments, I mean, these are people who most of them had to be kicked out from their house and all of that. They were really willing to host people, and that's something that I think remains something to be, I guess, being from the region, something that I would like us all to be proud of, is the fact that we remain resilient and hospitable despite all of the challenges. And I mean, now we can actually go to the book itself, which I'm going to share, but I recommend that people actually buy it because we have just released it on the website, but also on Amazon. So tell us, how did this book came about in terms of all the logistics and uh, what really has excited you about it?
Right, well, so I began by thinking about what makes IBB and the Innovation Hub approach different. I've covered a lot of projects run by big development agencies over the years, and while some of their work is obviously impactful, it seems like too often it really is just a handful of people that benefit from an often one-size-fits-all approach that just doesn't take into account the individual circumstances, or have a long-term impact. So what the Innovation Hub does is different. You know, it's giving hundreds of people the funds to invest as they see fit to develop projects or start businesses or other enterprises that have the scope to make a real impact on the communities that they live in. It's, as we say in the book, that these are their responses to problems they understand. So we just help them realize those responses and build the future that they envisage for the region. And the result of this approach is that the solutions we support are immensely varied and often quite unexpected, to be honest. I mean, but I think this is one of the Innovation Hub's strengths. You know, we aren't limited in the nature and scope of the projects that we support. So I really wanted to convey this in the book, you know, this breadth and the opportunities that that creates through enterprises like LIGO, which is, we've written about that on page 14 of the book. It's a taxi company in Mosul that uses female drivers. And I mean, a lot of people here probably know that most women in Mosul aren't allowed to travel unless they're either driven or accompanied by a male relative. So this service, which has now launched an app, thanks partly to the Innovation Hub support, has proved enormously popular because it means that women can go to university, they can go to work, other engagements, rather than having to turn down these opportunities simply because of transport barriers. Another example of the diverse opportunities that the Innovation Hub supports is Kurdwares. That story for that is on page 41, where alongside employing people in the Kurdish city of Duhok's first leatherware workshop, Cameron Safar plans to train stay-at-home mothers so that they can start their own businesses and become self-sufficient. It was really difficult to whittle down the stories to include because we've supported so many different and inspiring people. And obviously you can explore all of the others on our website if you're hungry for more when you've finished reading the book. But they all have their own tale to tell and they're all worth reading about. But yeah, I think my hope is that through the book, readers will get a sense of the many different opportunities that there are to make a difference and support innovation and enterprise across the region.
Yeah, I mean I would say is like one of the main things that I know Mansoor, who is our Afghanistan program manager, is here. So maybe I'll give him some time to talk about some of the Afghanistan stories. But what I find surprising is that like when I'm reading the news about a specific region, and then I'm reading the applications that come from that region or from that country, it's very widely different. I mean, you see that obviously the moment you search put news like Iraq on the news, you will see a lot of, I don't know, Hezbollah leader, Iraqi branch was killed by a US strike or something like that. While at the same time, what we get from the Innovation Hub is like someone want to fix electricity for his neighborhood utilizing solar panels and be able to create kind of sustainable business model, which is something that I would say is the kind of a common theme or a significant theme of how this program came to be. In fact, one of the inspirations for this program was when we were talking with Tyler Cohen and some of others was how can we, I know that that's a question that nonprofits should not talk about, but it's a question about how can we cease to exist? And the question is like, how can we, if we have a mission, which is very specific as in case of Ideas Beyond Borders, is that how can we really, if there is such a thing as a mission accomplished moment, which I know the word mission accomplished has been associated with the Iraq War, but is that can we define that and what do we need to do to achieve it? And you'll see that, I mean, Kurdwares is actually a very a great example because he's one of the people who can actually sell products after our support and be able to generate revenue in which he didn't ask for additional funding after we provided him with the first grant. Compared to like many organizations in which you give them funding and then they ask for you the next year, and that's not something that's bad. I mean, we do it as well, but it just shows that many of the projects that we do support we get people on their feet and they're able to not rely on us as much after that support. And that's something that I would say is also a common theme of many of the stories you cover, Olivia, is that many of the people who like this one, for example, which I'm sharing, is that he's also one of the people who also asked for one grant. I mean, we do have a one grant policy that we only give only in certain occasions when there is emergencies and there are people who, for example, have faced security issues or etc., that we will actually renew a grant if it's the same idea. But this is one of the projects that I'm also very proud of, is that he is building a platform, kind of like a Talent Market or other websites that are utilized in which they try to get Kurdish people able to get jobs within Iraq, Kurdistan region of Iraq, and outside. And so this is making machines work, which is kind of, I think, similar to what you covered before, Olivia, the station, but it's like it's a works. Can you tell us more about that? That I really love this story as well.
Yeah, sure. So Mohammed's always really enjoyed playing around with machinery. It's been his passion growing up. I think he worked in this space when it was funded by another organization. That came to an end, but he was really determined to keep it going. And he put all of his own income into it, all of his own time and effort, worked really long days so that he could keep this space going. It's for engineers to learn their craft, really, and give makers a chance to experiment and create really amazing things. You've got kind of prosthetic limbs here, and it's a really broad range of things. There's a blind stick as well. So people can come there and they can practice and they can hone their skills using equipment that they just don't have access to in universities. It's really state of the art. So I think we provided them with a 3D printing machine and another machine, which the name of which I cannot remember off the top of my head, but it's there in the story. And so they can really learn from top of the range products and then go into the market fully qualified to fill then skills gaps in the market, so people don't have to get that talent in from abroad. And yeah, he gives his all to it, really. It's really impressive.
Yeah, so I mean, I would love to get Mansoor is our program manager in Afghanistan. He can talk a bit. Mansoor, if I mean, you could probably join, is to tell us like what is the current situation in Afghanistan and some of the stories.
Hello, hello. Hi, Olivia. Hi, Faisal, and everybody else here in the call. This is Ahmed Mansoor Ramizy. I'm the program director for Afghanistan at Ideas Beyond Borders. Am I sounding clear?
You are, but before I would like to actually thank Atlas Network for introduce. Actually, it was Tom Palmer in particular who introduced us together.
Absolutely, absolutely. We always say this. So it's been amazing how we find each other in this small space, small but still vast space that we're working. I'm absolutely, Faisal. First of all, it's been an absolutely amazing journey and absolute privilege and honor to work with Olivia and work with you and everybody else on the team at Ideas Beyond Borders, and specifically with Olivia in the past 2 years, 2.5 years or so, since we've known each other and we've been working together. Me finding grantees for Faisal to approve, and then Faisal approving them, and then me coming back to Olivia with people for her to interview and get stories out of. It's been an absolute honor and absolute privilege, especially the past few months when we've been busy working on this book. The situation on the ground in Afghanistan is better understood through the lens of our people working on the ground right now through the Innovation Hub, for example. These are people who actually have to go door to door, office to office, ask for permissions, ask for certificates, ask for permits for things that we might see mundane and normal, and much easier in the West, in Europe and elsewhere. But these people face a lot of challenges, trying to find solutions to some of these very easy and mundane things inside Afghanistan. These businesses who are starting out, and $1,000 can go a very long way for these kind of businesses that are just establishing themselves right now inside Afghanistan. I believe that through these stories from the Innovation Hub, we have covered a small aspect. We have shed light on a small aspect of the situation on the ground, from the issues that girls face on the ground, from the journalists who are covering stories that are very difficult to cover inside Afghanistan. These are stories of abuse. There are stories of brutality of the Taliban and oppression, of not just girls inside Afghanistan, but forced marriages, banning them from going to school, banning them from entertainment and music, and everything else in between, that's happening right now, that are being covered right now by people from the Innovation Hub. Yes.
Mansoor, not to interrupt you, can you expand more on the underground schools story, which I think is really fascinating here?
Absolutely. The Underground Schools program, funded by Ideas Beyond Borders, started in 2021 as soon as the Taliban rolled into the country and issued a public statement banning all forms of education for girls above sixth grade. We stepped in helping a bunch of school teachers who were previously employed by the government, serving people, but now were jobless. They didn't have a job, and they still wanted to dedicate their time and effort in order to make sure that girls and their students still can have access to education. We have helped more than 8,680 students so far within this program. We currently have, in 2023, we currently have over 4,500 students currently studying in our schools. We have 28 locations across Afghanistan where these kids are busy studying. These are kids from 7th and 8th grade all the way up until 12th grade. And we have employed over 58 teachers who are busy educating these girls at these 28 locations. These are secret, clandestine operations carried out in the different locations. Obviously, we can't talk more about that. But it's become a very small community of these students where they are able to where they have access to resources, to information, and they have access to education in a way that's impossible for them to find this elsewhere outside in the city right now under current circumstances. And I think this is a very amazing story that I really do recommend people to look into when they purchase this book.
I have a question for you both, and Olivia, because I can see here at the bottom of the book, it says the names in this piece have been changed for security purposes. So Mansoor explained a bit about the situation, but I'm trying to think of it also emotionally, Olivia. What it's like to talk to somebody that doesn't want to share their name, and how often have you been dealing with that?
It varies in terms of the amount of people that want to withhold their name. Sometimes people ask automatically. Sometimes people just ask for their pictures, their faces not to be shown. It's actually more us taking precautions to protect the people that we support who withhold or change, use pseudonyms. And that's why we use Lana's beautiful illustrations to depict the stories, because we don't want to use the photos, even if we've got, good ones to use. It's not worth the risk. Yeah, but it certainly, the Afghanistan section was the hardest one emotionally. When I went back through editing the book and would read whole sections in a go, that one is the one that it puts a lump in your throat, because reading it all together at once is it's grueling.
Yeah, I mean, it's I would say one of the probably most impactful places we've also get involved in is like we're as Mansoor was saying, in terms of providing thousands of uh girls with education. But it also happens to also be the most dangerous place for us to work in as well. It's both rewarding and um I guess difficult. I guess these things sometimes go hand in hand, because otherwise, why do we need to exist if these things can so I mean, I guess one of my regrets, maybe I could say, is that I have not been able to visit Afghanistan, because it seems like it's a very there's a lot of in the book you'll see like there's a lot of people who are doing amazing work, but I have visited all the three places that are featured in the book, which is Iraq, Kurdistan region of Iraq, and Lebanon. I do look like this one as well, which is the one about um, the Afghan children. So that's like what's interesting is that it feels like that there's two kind of parallel lives happening. There's I think what you read from Afghanistan chapter, but also I would say theme of the book is that well, it's like really nothing looks good in Afghanistan after the US withdrawal and a lot of the kind of the challenges that came there. Um, but there is like still life continues and people are coming up with creative ideas and people are really resilient in terms of defying the authorities to continue to do this, which I guess basic things as Mansoor was saying is like which is like girls education. But people who are living in kind of these authoritarian regimes constantly impress us. I mean, we're seeing it right now in Venezuela with all of the people in the streets, but also I'm probably gonna butcher her last name, but Maria, the political opposition, and she's in the streets fighting for democracy for Venezuela. It's really inspiring. I mean, Mansoor, I still will have you. I mean, you mentioned finding people. Can you talk more about like where do you find innovators in Afghanistan? Because I'm sure some people might be interested.
Absolutely. I think one of the best things that happened to us as a country as a whole the past 20 years was the introduction of in a way the introduction of technology and internet and a slight importation of liberal values for us as a whole as a country, and that enabled the young communities to form networks within each other, to find to shape these smaller communities of engineers, of civil society activists, of people interested in art, and these smaller communities evolved and grew within the last 20 years in Afghanistan. Well, now 24 years, but let's cut down the 3 years of the Taliban regime and brutality in the country. But the last 20 years was very productive for the young generation inside Afghanistan. And that kind of provided a base for us because living inside the country, you get to interact with these communities, you get to interact with artists, you get to interact with musicians, you get to interact with through personal relationships, through family, through friends, through classmates and relatives. You get to interact with all of these kind of people and you meet them. And eventually, when the time comes, which it did, unfortunately, where there was a huge ban issued and everything kind of disappeared from the surface, but everything slightly went out of the surface and went underground. Then these kind of connections became vital and important, and it paid off. That's how we were able to contact people inside these communities who are still active. Most of them fled the country, of course, and are in exile, but some of them still exist and some of them still function. So that way, we still were able to tap into the artistic community inside Afghanistan. We were able to tap into the engineers, to innovators, entrepreneurs, people who run virtual schools, who people who run virtual universities. So the basis why I think laid out for us in the past 20 years, and then Somehow we found ourselves in need of this kind of connection later on, and we eventually were able to tap into it. It's obviously very tricky, it's very difficult, especially working remotely from outside the country with no ability to go into the country and have access to the people over there. It makes our job trickier, it makes trusting people more difficult, it makes our job slightly difficult, but it has paid off rather well so far for us.
Um, I'll have like a question maybe to ask Olivia, but I do want to cover Lebanon because it's one of the countries we also happen to work in, which is a country that's now facing, um, I guess is that by comparison to Afghanistan and what Mansoor was talking about, I guess Lebanon has a, maybe you can say, a better reputation. But Olivia, what has been your experience working with Lebanese invaders?
Well, I mean, they've been through an awful lot in recent years. You know, they've had the uprisings, the economic crash, they've had the lockdown impact on business, they had the Beirut port blast, and now they've got the war in Gaza. So, I mean, that's enough to finish most startups. But the ones that we're supporting, they've found a way through. They've either started during this really difficult period and continued against the odds, or they've started a little bit before and found a way to keep going. And frankly, I'm just in awe of them. I come off the phone or Zoom or whatever it is I've spoken to them on and can't really believe it. There's, for example, Halaby Bookshop, which is the story of how Lana Halaby revived a family business. It was an old bookshop, and it had just, her father had collected so many books that it almost sealed the front shut, and they couldn't even get in there. And she managed to turn it around, and she's managed to sustain it as an independent bookshop, not an easy business in any country, during all of these difficulties. So stories like hers have really inspired me, but not all of them have survived. One of the startups that we supported was still a courier service in Tripoli, which is where I lived for a few years, a few months. That one has unfortunately since folded. It was doing really well, but the war in Gaza meant that all the investors pulled out, and it wasn't able to carry on. But we included it in the book because it's very much the people rather than the projects that we support through the Innovation Hub, because whether or not a business or an enterprise succeeds, by giving these people the opportunity to build their skills and their experience and their networks, we know that they'll go on to use those lessons in the future to keep building things. And that's exactly what Nazir Halawani, the founder of Wasil, will continue to do. He's entrepreneurial by nature. I knew him actually before we were introduced to the Innovation Hub, and he's done other amazing things. And he actually told us that having been supported by the Innovation Hub, when he is in a position to do so, he will support other aspiring entrepreneurs. So yeah, he's a great example of an Innovation Hub grantee.
Yeah, and there's, I mean, the maybe that gets me to a question about journalism and media in general. And we have done this book, which I think is really, I mean, you have done most of the book, Olivia, so thank you. Is that how do you think we can make people interested in these stories? I have kind of a both optimistic and idealistic vision of the world, but I'm also, I would say, a cynical view of the world. Is sometimes what sells is the kind of the sensational, I guess, negative and provocative stories. And how do you think we can not necessarily sell these people? I mean, sell the stories of these people, not selling them. I guess that's the bad choice of words. But how do you think we can make these stories more accessible, knowing that the climate of the media and journalism is more focused on what's wrong than what's right?
It's true. What makes the front pages are the stories of horror and the clickbait headlines. That's certainly the case. But I also think that people are exhausted with hearing that and the news. A lot of people do switch off from it because they can't take any more of it. some of the feedback that I get just from friends and families and people that read the Innovation Hub and the IBB newsletters is how refreshing and uplifting it is to read positive stories from the Middle East. So it shows that it's not done enough. The newspapers don't give a huge amount of space to it, but we are seeing a little bit more focus on solutions stories. There are some dedicated platforms out there for solutions journalism, and even some magazines focusing on positive news. We have a publication by that name here in the UK. So there is a sort of a pocket of it. But I think in terms of increasing interest, I think we just really need to let the people who are doing these amazing things speak for themselves, give their voice a platform, give them the attention that they deserve. And so, that's exactly what we're doing here. We're giving them support, and in the book, we're giving them that platform.
Would you say, what do you think people should know about, or what message are you trying to send through this book? Is it what you just said, or you think there's more?
Yeah. I think it is that our main message is that there is hope. And it's not just that there's hope, there's opportunity in the Middle East, and even in Afghanistan, despite the bleak outlook of life under the Taliban. Every week, I speak with people who are proposing innovative solutions to the challenges that they've grown up with and that they see in the communities around them, creating opportunities for other people to work and learn and create and grow. And I think what they show is that there are so many ways to support education and empowerment that go beyond the traditional methods focused on by most development organizations. And I think we just need to let people living in these countries, living in the region, tell us what they need and how we can help.
Yeah, I wonder, I should probably finish editing my TED Talk, but I wonder if the challenge, when I was a kid in Iraq, and there was obviously the US aid program and all of that stuff operating in Iraq, but most of it doesn't exist. So what was broadcasted on the US channels, which was the Voice of America and Al Hurra, was that the US was doing all this nation building and schools being built, etc. But there were no schools. Maybe like 1 out of the 10 stories that were that were actually real. So in ways that in some cases there were a lot of local resentment against the US aid program, the State Department, etc. So and kind of the initial kind of thought of people is that, oh, these kind of grant officers and whatever that system of hierarchies within the US government is, or the European governments, is that these are just bad people, right? There's contractors who are stealing money, etc. But alluding to what you're saying, I think is that it seems to be more and more that it's a systems problem, not a people problem. Is that if there's a system that is like people in DC or Brussels or London deciding what people there need, then by default there's going to be a mismatch. Versus here, we're actually just applying, for the lack of a better word, the free market principles of supply and demand. Is that there are people who want this, there are people who pay for it. That's it. Is that we're actually supplying the demands of the so in a ways that is, I wouldn't claim to be more moral than the grant officer at the State Department, but I think is that it's a change of system, and like we are supplying what the people need, not what we think they need. And that being said, with a framework of our values. If people want guns and stuff, we don't support that. But if people want to have a startup and innovate and improve other people's lives in their own way, as we are seeing here in the book. For example, Tech for Peace was fighting misinformation in Arabic. So this is not necessarily a business startup, but they were trying to do that, or the people supporting the Kurds from Iran. So I think, we're actually close on time to moving to the Q&A. I see your author's note, which I really like, Olivia. What else? What do you think I haven't asked you?
Um, what haven't you asked me? Um, I suppose if I was to add anything, I'd just like to highlight a few more of the stories that really stood out for me. Um,
Tell me the page number.
so
I
on
think
page 55, we've got a story about cybercrimes in Kurdistan. So IBB supported research work done by Dr. Kazan Mohammed and his team to expose a network that were harassing and blackmailing women and children, male and female children, online. It was a story that really resonated with me. I've covered this issue a lot for newspapers, and I just feel furious every time I write about it. I've seen the terror and the devastation that these women and girls who fall prey to these predators online feel when they start blackmailing them, and what happens when their families turn against them, as often happens if they're exposed. Um,
I believe I found it. It
it's
is this one.
There's a very powerful illustration there, yeah. But I
That
was
is our
actually
first success story of policy change, by the way. Before
exactly.
now, the one we're doing with Atlas Network about the changing the laws regarding business, but that was our first track record. I also the title is eye-catching.
But I was really thrilled because Kazem Mohammed messaged me not long ago, a week or two, to say that security forces have actually apprehended the ringleader of the cybercrimes gang that was blackmailing these women. Um, and that was thanks partly to recommendations that had been made with research funded by the Innovation Hub. I'm happy to elaborate further on exactly how that happened if anyone's interested, but it's really wonderful. This guy's been I don't know what's going to happen to him in the justice system, but he's certainly been arrested along with some of his co-predators. So that was really wonderful to hear, and an exact example of the Innovation Hub support having a real impact.
What other stories? You said a couple.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I could talk about all of them for a very long time, but let's see. Well, we've already touched on the story of the female journalists who in Afghanistan. But one of the things that one of the journalists said has really stayed with me. Her name, well, we called her Sana, but we changed their names to protect them. But she said that when she focuses on highlighting the stories of women who are suffering domestic abuse and other violations, which are now going largely unchecked under the Taliban. There's really no one to help them. And she said that she feels utterly helpless when she covers these stories. She can't really do anything, but that just by listening, she helps them feel less alone. And she said that she comes home in the evening and it affects the relationship she has with her family because she's so affected by these stories. But she carries on doing it because it brings a little bit of hope to the women that she speaks with, who get some sense of comfort from knowing that people will read these stories and care about them. So it's a lot less positive, but at least you can see the impact then of writing these stories on the people who are in them. Even if it's small and even if it doesn't actually make a physical difference, it brings them some hope. And that's important when you're in a despairing situation, I think. Another story that stood out, another Afghan story, was the piece that we included in our section on the crisis response funds about the Kaj Education Institution in Kabul. It was attacked by a suicide bomber in 2022 when students were sitting mock exams. So I spoke with the director, Mukhtar Madaba, soon after, and he told me how the community rallied round really quickly to rebuild the school with funds from the Innovation Hub grant. Unfortunately, it's happened quite a lot of times in the area that they're in. It's a minority Hazara community, and they've been targeted many times. But in spite of that, they wanted to rebuild the school and get back to class. I think Mukhtar's own sister was among the 53 people killed that day. And he said to, I've got the quote here, he said, people here still want to fight and continue to struggle for their right to education. We're going to do everything we can to rebuild and start again. And that's exactly what they did. They rebuilt the school and they're back learning.
Yeah, that's a very emotional but also very powerful story. And to kind of move forward to a Q&A. I mean, it's really like always inspires me how a lot of people want to the moment that they're just given an agency over their own life with some support through Ideas Beyond Borders and the Innovation Hub program, miracles can happen. So it's really, I would say that that's my reading of the book is that people doing miraculous things and them forging their own path in a very positive direction. Thank you so much, Olivia. I mean, we could come to the Q&A again. If people are interested, they can go to Amazon.com, which I think a website familiar to some people. Actually, and I probably might be able to post it here, but you can search the Untold Stories of the Middle East. I think it shouldn't be difficult to find. And we really hope to, if you are also connected to venues other than the ones I said we're gonna be speaking at, that you think would be willing to hear this message or be interested in hosting us to talk about the book and talk about these stories and the amazing people, please reach out to us. Faisal at ideasbeyondborders.org and Olivia at ideasbeyondborders.org. As she said, she's based in London, so Europe is more accessible to her and the Middle East is than I do. So maybe we can start jumping to questions. Maybe I could start with George. I think most people in the West would wonder, how are you able to conduct all these operations in Afghanistan under the eyes of the Taliban? How can IBB reassure that the doubtful people that the activities you write about do exist? That's a very good question. Mansoor, actually, because like the country director, I know the answer, but I think I would like to give you the floor to give a more local examples.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That's a perfectly sound question to me. Because we, quite honestly, we don't have a very nice track record in Afghanistan as a country, with billions of dollars invested in aid and humanitarian aid, government aids through USAID and all of these other agencies that we've talked about in the past as well. And it was always easier to funnel money into the country, but it was very difficult to track where the money actually went to. With all the imaginary schools and imaginary universities and imaginary posts and all of that we are all very well familiar with. Functioning in Afghanistan at today is as challenging as it was back then, and even more so, because the security aspect of it, we are always careful, we are always vigilant of what we are doing inside the country in terms of the people that we're dealing with, in terms of the kind of the logistics of our money going into the country and the way that we spend the money. There are measures, there are ways that we are sure of that facilitates this project's success into the country while maintaining our distance from the regime, from the de facto regime inside the country. One of the ways is obviously the financial way on how we deal with the finances. I cannot give more specific examples and details due to the security reasons, but based, but the people we have on the ground and 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 based on our own experiences inside the country and my experiences personally as a program manager, we are sure of our projects inside the country. Moreover, even though we can't visit the country, me or Faisal can visit the country as the program leads and president, we still have people that goes into the physical sites of these projects. Our assistant manager is in Afghanistan, for example. Our representatives go into the country from time to time, and they are actually visiting these projects. We get our media and our reports, our media reports from our grantees all the time, constantly, and also through our own people. So there are ways where we are actually visiting them and we're actually looking at these projects, so that to make sure that they actually do exist and that they're actually doing what they've told us that they would do.
Thank you so much, Mansoor, and thank you, George, for the questions. And uh, we have a question from Debbie Gate. I wonder if there are uh, happy to work with you, Debbie. More wondering if there are common values shared by the entrepreneurs IBB supports across the region. Olivia?
Common values. It does vary from story to story. You know, some people are more interested in the business side of things. Some people see it as social enterprise, and for some it's both. Like Cameron at Curdwares, it's both. He actually could, to a degree, have self-funded Curdwares. He is a petroleum engineer, so he has a decent income. But he also wanted to show other people in Kurdistan that it is possible to get funding to launch a startup, and he wants to help other people do that and go through that process, which seems very prohibitive, I think, to a lot of entrepreneurs in the region. So whilst he does certainly want Kurdwares to be a successful business, and it is becoming so, his driving force, if you like, is to help others. So I think you see that a lot, that spirit a lot as well, of helping others achieve. Determination. You have to be determined. That has to underpin everything that you do, because there are a lot of hurdles and a lot of challenges. You know, funding obviously, but there are plenty of others, even in the places that are more open to business, like Kurdistan. You know, it's really difficult. So I think you really have to be passionate about the business that you're launching, and really committed, and ready to stick it out, whatever it throws at you.
Yeah, and I mean, these are all, I would say, values that we champion in the organization, is that we champion um, ambition, determination, free enterprise, business solutions other than governmental ones. And I would say and I want to kind of jump into the question that's also connected. But there are lots of stories, and we're now like, even though the original model of emergent ventures, which we kind of followed as an inspiration for this, does not try to seek more covering of these people, but we are trying to do, considering that this is probably a first time something like this exists in the region in terms of the model. And one of the things that we focus on, at least as a measure, a way to pick some of these projects, is that the ability for people to produce things that can connect them to the global markets. So whether, for example, Curdwares is a great example in which, yes, I mean, these might not be sold in a Louis Vuitton store or something that's of great value, but at the same time, he has the ability to produce things that people outside the local community with kind of less purchasing power, but more to areas where they can have high purchasing powers, like Saudi Arabia or UAE and other places where people can buy his products, and therefore he's able to hire more people and keep that economy going. So one of the things that as a kind of a theme in some of the projects we funded, is that one of our say drive is that we want to empower people to be in a place where they don't need us anymore, and for us to really achieve our mission. So we try to focus a lot, especially recently, to support projects that we think have a potential for them to survive and be part of the global economy and the global markets, which I think beneficial to both the globe and the local community. Which connects me to the question of okay, I guess an anonymous attendee, asking, how do you feel the stories can shift or change Western perceptions of political and economic state and opportunity in the Middle East? I will answer some of that. Olivia, I'd like your answer too, because you were born in the West, unlike me, who just jumped in 11 years ago. I think it can change a lot. One thing is that in a way it covers, I would say, all parts of the political spectrum within the West. Is that for those who are interested of what's sometimes called the refugee crisis or the rising refugees across the West. This is actually a proven method that a lot of people, when they have agency and they can improve their own countries, they don't need to immigrate. So in ways like improving the economic conditions for many of the people who live in the region uh, contributes for people to stay. And obviously, this kind of sounds like a simplistic answer. I would say that security is definitely um, a very major thing, as we're seeing, for example, right now, Iraq is relatively more secure than it was over the past decade. So as a result, many of the people staying as a result of security. So I think the that's, I would say, one thing on the kind of, I would say, the anti-immigration voices within the West is that this actually a proven method that can reduce immigration. For those who are kind of more humanitarian in nature and want to support, is that they will see that it's really doesn't take much to actually create more change. When people try to think of, okay, if we want to create more employments and things, we need billions of dollars of aid. We have proven that that's not the case. So in a way is that, I mean, it would be ideal if somebody writes us $1 billion check. I'm not gonna say no to that. I don't know if I can deposit it, but it would be a good problem to have. But we saw that really if you set up concrete goals of trying to improving living situations and change this model, the Innovation Hub, we have seen that it actually can do a lot with much little than that is expected. So I think is that if people start seeing if change as incremental and something that collectively, if it is a small business here, a small business there, just from the stories alone, we have actually, according to stats that we gathered, we have 35,000 jobs created. And that is in a fund that is pretty much less than $1 million by now. So imagine what can we do if we double that and if we triple that. And you'll see that some of the stories that Olivia was mentioning, these are people who are willing to hire more people and kind of what's sometimes called pay it forward, of trying to after getting help doing that. So I think there is a lot that we are, I think the book can change the perception of the West, of the Middle East in general, but also the fact that aid doesn't have to be a development, doesn't have to be a crippling global welfare state, but actually an empowering tool to move people from X to Y, and they can be prosperous and have peaceful future. Please, Olivia.
I mean, I think you've covered a lot of it there. I just would also add that, you know, people have a default response when you talk about the Middle East, and they just assume it's a problem zone and unfortunately write it off as a result. When I tell people about the stories that I write for Ideas Beyond Borders, about the solutions that we cover, they're usually surprised and they say, well, is there anything positive to say about the Middle East? It's the usual response. And when I elaborate a little bit and explain a bit more and give some examples, there's a genuine interest and engagement there, and a kind of, okay, well, that's interesting moment. And so I think if we can do that on a larger scale through this book, through other similar projects, through, you know, social media, whatever means possible, then I think we can slowly start to chip away at that default perception and nudge it in a different direction and let some of the hope and opportunity shine through, and then more people might become invested in it and maybe support it.
And that moves me to the last question from Bianca. Hello, Bianca. She's asking, how does the book address the ways that IBB and the Innovation help startups navigate and transcend politically dangerous limitations in the region? So IBB as an organization, as I said, we have been working a lot through Kurdistan is open for business and for us to change policies in some of these countries. So that addresses some of the legal challenges. For example, starting a business has been a very difficult thing in some of these countries, including in Kurdistan region of Iraq. So we're working a lot with the Kurdish government, in which hopefully we can turn the registration time from 3 months to 3 days. And So these are some of the hurdles that would be very beneficial that work tangentially to actually supporting these businesses. And that's something that we would love to continue doing in terms of really working with anybody who's willing to work with us in the region to improve the lives and create prosperity as much as possible. So I think that the Innovation Hub itself doesn't address policy challenges, but as an organization, we are something that is very committed to that, as it's something that can really help as many, probably thousands and thousands of people. We are on time, so that's at 7 o'clock. But before we end, I really recommend everybody to buy the book, and probably the hardcover one, which is available on Amazon and the website. All of proceeds help us continue doing this work and continue doing this, supporting these amazing projects that are well vetted of people who want to create change, positive change in their societies. I would like to thank again Olivia for all the amazing work she has done in really making these stories accessible to the masses. Thank you again, Olivia. It's been really a pleasure working with you. And please, the link is, we're going to post this webinar on social media. And please, if you do buy the book, also leave us a review. That will help hopefully more people get to know about these stories. And if you manage a venue or anything related to a venue that you think they need to hear these stories, they need to invite Olivia or me to come speak and talk about these stories. That will be wonderful. So thank you again, Olivia, and thanks for all who listened to us live and for those watching us online and will watch us online as when we publish this video. Enjoy the rest of your evening and thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.